Welcome back to the Work Inspired Podcast. I'm your host, George Lucas Pfeiffer, and today we continue the conversation with partner and Senior Vice President of Workplace Strategy for CRG, Geoff Kasselman. Last week, we talked about so many exciting and interesting things regarding what the next 5 to 10 years will entail, and we wanted to continue that conversation and dive a little bit deeper on some of the changes ahead. So buckle your seatbelts because we're in for a roller coaster of a ride. Work Inspired starts right now. We're back with Geoff Kasselman, talking about the future, talking about innovation, disruptive tech, things I'm super passionate about, and clearly you are too.
You are passionate about it.
Talking about making change over here. So when we left off, we started getting into quantum computing and artificial intelligence. But I wanted to have this kind of second episode here, Geoff, just to talk through what are some of these things? You know, some of these things are buzzwords, clearly, autonomous vehicles, EV, 3D printing, but maybe we can get into each one just a little bit more in detail, just to get people to whet the appetite. We talked about maybe, what can we do now? It would be become a master of something, or at least know something about these things, so that if you hire somebody at your organization that is going to code Python and do AI, that you know a little bit about what it is. So I have a feeling that if we went down this list of disruptive tech, there's a good chance that so many of our listeners...
So that's from McKinsey, that list you're looking at? And every one of those is projected conservatively to be $1 trillion marketplace by 2025.
So we're talking within the next 5 years.
Route. That's right.
My goodness.
So it's really when those things happen, converge, and all of them are mainstream all at the same time. That to me is the big deal.
Right.
Not any one of those individually.
Right.
But you could talk about a fast emerging $1 trillion marketplace all by itself all day long, and that's a big deal.
You could, yeah.
But they're all going to be $1 trillion markets all at the same time. That's
fascinating. That's a lot of money, a lot of capital.
And that's McKinsey saying that. That's not me saying that.
Yeah.
I'm just citing the data.
Well, I like the sound of it. But let's start off with what we talked about. We talked about quantum computing. The thing that I thought was interesting, which we didn't touch on in the last episode, was that you are saying Chicago, where we're recording now, could be the home of quantum computing, at least in the United States. Is that, or a hub for quantum computing?
Yeah. So University of Chicago, in partnership with Argonne and with Fermi, and with Northwestern, and with Wisconsin, and with University of Illinois, and my apologies to anybody listening if I've left somebody out, but an unprecedented partnership. And here's an example of, we can't do it ourselves organically. We're going to have to partner to do it. Yeah. There's a good example of it. Okay, they've launched something called the Chicago Quantum Exchange, being housed at a University of Chicago facility in the city of Chicago, where it is their intent to be the bleeding edge of quantum caliber computing for the world to benefit.
And is that
That's launched. That is underway.
Okay. And is this a 2025 projection too? I don't see it on the list, but obviously I don't think quantum computing becomes $1 trillion market by 2025, which is what that list is. It certainly becomes $1 trillion marketplace in 10 or 15 years. I'm not a quantum computing expert, but there are physics limitations, heat, right, as a byproduct of the size, qubits, which are so in the digital world you have ones and zeros, and any combination of those ones and zeros gives you the ability to digitize things, right? In quantum computing, you have your ones and your zeros, and then you have your 1 zeros, and your 1 zeros are qubits. That's what they're called, and it gives you the ability to exponentially change your ability to do calculations faster. Okay. But there's something called quantum supremacy, which some people are claiming we've achieved, but we really haven't achieved it yet, which is the point at which the cost to use quantum computing to solve a particular issue, problem, calculation is more cost effective than not using it. When we get to that tipping point where it's more effective to use quantum computing,
it will hit that scale, but that's a little further off.
You talked about artificial intelligence being the game changer on the same level as fire.
Yeah.
How dependent on large scale artificial intelligence, or how dependent on quantum computing is large scale artificial intelligence? Do we need that kind of computing power to really see that kind of fire level change with artificial intelligence? Or is quantum computing just going to accelerate it and artificial intelligence is going to come regardless?
I've come to view artificial intelligence as an overlay to everything. And so you're going to take any subject matter and then partner it with AI to make it supremely, exponentially better and more powerful. But it's what I call the magnifying glass effect. It's going to make good things really great. Yeah. And it's going to make bad things really bad. It's not just good. It's not just bad. It's going to have equal and profound effects in both directions.
That makes sense. I do see on this list from McKinsey that energy is listed in like 3 or 4 of these top 12 things. Tell me about energy. Alternate energy, renewable energy. These are big trends right now. Where are we going to get our power from?
Well, this is probably my greatest professional accident or a stroke of luck. I don't know what to call it. But when I started my own company, Optimize, in 2004, and one of the 3 pillars was energy, I had to quickly learn energy. And so I started to provide demand reduction consultation to my real estate clients. I helped them consume less energy. And so I began to, self-educate and learn it and figure it out. And so that was my entry point. That ended up being a very commoditized field very quickly. Some people were even giving that away for free to get to the ability to sell them lighting or to get to the ability to sell them something different, which I was not selling. So it wasn't a very profitable business segment for us, but it was also incomplete in the sense that you can have demand for energy and then you have supply of energy, and we weren't touching the supply side. So I bought a company that was only energy supply, rebranded it Optimize Energy. But the magic for that to me was not the energy, it was the fact that they had this accounts receivable. They had a book of receivables that I could now go to a bank and pledge as collateral against a loan, which is what I needed to grow my business at that moment in time. So I wasn't really that interested in the energy supply. I was interested in the loan, the ability, the loan dynamics. At any rate, it was right around then that Newmark came along and said, hey, I'd be interested in buying your company if you would be interested in selling it. And so I never really got a chance to leverage that book of business as loan collateral. But Newmark didn't buy that business. They only bought the real estate services business. And so that business has now grown exponentially since 2013, which is when we launched it, which has given me a really big front row seat to what's happening in the world of energy and why. So suffice it to say that the earth is bathed in enough raw energy from the sun every single day that every human being on earth combined couldn't consume. Okay? So there's an infinite, unlimited supply. It's not like wind where it has to actually blow to consume it, right? The energy from the sun is always on, even when it's dark, okay? If you can store it in a commercially scaled battery, so you can harness it during the day, consume it during the night, and on you go, okay? Even in a cloudy day, even in the snow, Earth is just bathed in solar energy. And so for that reason, most of the experts believe when we solve the physical constraint, which is battery storage.
Right.
Once that is solved, the world pivots to solar renewable energy as the dominant source of energy for the foreseeable future, however long that is. Hundreds of years, longer, shorter, who's to say? It doesn't have the risks of nuclear, doesn't have the risks of hydrogen, right? It's unlimited. All I have to do is figure out how to collect it and store it. I don't even have to distribute it. I can just consume it where it's collected, right? And I think we're well on our way to that happening. So my bet is on solar. I think solar already employs more people than the entire oil industry does.
Really? Mm-hmm. I didn't know that.
Has for about 18 months. Wow. I mean, that happened a little while ago. Yeah. I think most people will tell you that's the energy of choice moving forward.
We had a lithium expert on the show a few episodes back, and we talked a little bit about the raw material need for doing that effectively. But who knows if some of these disruptive techs will change that. And
$500 million per year of private equity and investment capital funding research to unlock something that has been stubbornly linear, which is battery storage.
Yeah.
That has not proven to be an exponential growth curve kind of thing. Maybe it's just always going to be a linear thing, in which case maybe all bets are off.
Yeah.
Okay. But I believe we're well on our way to solving it. There's been some small scale solutions that haven't necessarily been able to hit a global scale and be delivered to the earth as a permanent solution. But you can count on Tesla and Panasonic and others to lead the charge. And what's really interesting is my company, Clayco, is building a bunch of battery plants around the country. World's biggest battery plant, SK Battery in South Carolina, and we leverage that into other battery plants. And so, there's a real world manifestation of that for me professionally right now, in addition to owning an energy company, right, which is battery tech.
Very cool. Let's talk a little bit about free internet. You talked about
that's my new thing.
Yeah, so you talked about Sol is providing it.
I'm copycatting that idea, right?
And so, how do you get that? How do you get a city to enact that level of change? Is it 5G technology that makes it happen? Is it just the right politician to say yes? How does this happen?
That's a great question. I think it depends on your ability to fund it. Mm-hmm. Okay, so there's an initial outlay. So there's a one-time pop, and then there's an ongoing cost. Right? And so you have to sort of break it into parts and say, okay, how are we going to fund it initially? And I think there are public-private partnership routes for that and grants, maybe federal grants, okay? And then there's an ongoing component to that. And maybe that's a 2 cents per night hospitality charge. Okay. Or there's so many different ways to collect that without overcharging for it. And that's the maintenance of it, right? So I think there are some mechanisms to fund it, but you really have to get leadership aligned with the vision of what it means to the city of Chicago over that 10 or 20 year period of time. What I can tell you is for the last 20 years, slowly the city is eroding in terms of its population base and its manufacturing base, which is its main jobs provider or creator. Yeah. Okay. And so until you have a really significant scalable way to address those two issues, the city will continue a slow and steady decline. It's less expensive to operate somewhere else, better quality of living somewhere else, right? Politics, taxes, pension crisis, governors going to jail. There must be a better place to live than this for a lot of people. Yeah. Okay. So what could you do to turn that upside down? And in my humble viewpoint, I think it starts with free internet forevermore in the city of Chicago for every human being in the city of Chicago. You get a very positive PR boost, let's face it, when you do it. So instead of Chicago bang bang, which is how the world looks at Chicago, okay? 100 people shot last weekend, right? 16 people dead last weekend, every weekend, okay? Until we change the perception and that reality and give people a reason to stick around, the stickiness, right? And in my viewpoint, it's free internet for educators, for students, for government, for businesses, for workers, for tourists, for visitors. You're in Chicago for the day? Great. Here it is. Use it, consume it, innovate, collaborate. Same kind of messaging, right? that you get out of South Korea. And if we're the first big city in America to do it, what's going to stop Houston or Philadelphia or Boston or Las Vegas or anyone else from following suit? And pretty soon we've changed the business model, right? It also goes to no person left behind. In the city of Chicago, there are people, we have to face the reality, that have never been, they live in the city of Chicago and they've never been in a high-rise building. They live in the city of Chicago, they've never been to downtown. They live in Chicago, they've never been on an airplane. They live in Chicago, they've never been on the internet, okay? Well, how are they being educated? And where are they going to fit into the world? And who's going to employ them? And if they're not employable, what are they going to do? And so we perpetuate this problem of Chicago bang bang on that basis alone. And so this gives us the ability to level the playing field and connect everybody at what I consider to be our weakest link, which is that so many people don't have access and need access, but can't afford it. So let's take that obstacle out of the equation and see what we can do from there.
It does sound like a multi-benefit, a solution with a lot of different ways it can benefit.
I've not met a person yet who thinks it's a bad idea. And on the contrary, I've had a number of people say, "Hey, I'm jumping on that bandwagon. I'm going to help you."
It sounds awesome. Tell me, when we talked before, you had mentioned sister cities, and I was pretty surprised at how many Chicago had.
28, right?
28. That's crazy.
Crazy.
So, are any of those sister cities doing something similar? Are they attempting this, or is this? I guess it sounds like such a good idea.
The answer is I don't know. I doubt it.
Yeah.
Is my sense of it. But what a tremendous opportunity to challenge in a playful but productive way our sister cities to do the exact same thing in the exact same ways.
Very cool. All right, now I am going to warn our viewers or listeners at the beginning of this episode that this is going to be a little bit of a roller coaster. So I'm switching from free internet to all.
Now I'm nervous.
Tell me, we mentioned blockchain briefly in the last episode. Yeah. I have a little bit of Bitcoin, I have some crypto. I still don't get it. Someone's explained it to me. So this is one of those things that I'm going to have to learn a little bit more about. But if blockchain is going to be more than just cryptocurrency, if we're going to be able to own fractions of many different types of things, buildings maybe.
Yes.
Give me the 50,000 foot view of what blockchain looks like in the next 5 to 10 years.
I think, and this is a shocker for most people, I think blockchain is probably bigger than the internet itself at some point in time. And for me, in my professional career and lifetime, nothing was bigger than the internet.
Right.
That was the ultimate game changer.
Right.
So for somebody to say, hey, that's going to be bigger than, I think it's a pretty bold statement, and yet I just made it, right?
Yeah.
The blockchain technology, which I'm not going to sit here and explain too much, but rather compare it to things like your light switch.
Okay.
You know how it works when you flip it, or are you just glad that it does? Most people are just glad it works, okay? Yeah. Couldn't explain to you the physics behind why it turns on when I flip the switch and why it turns off when I flip it down, okay? Or Wi-Fi. You know how Wi-Fi works? Not everybody knows, right? Yeah. Some people, most don't. They're just glad it does, right? Internet itself. Yeah. How are packets of data being exchanged in a nearly instantaneous way with accuracy and often with security and privacy, not always, right? How's that really work? Or are you just glad that it does? So I think blockchain ultimately falls into sort of one of those kinds of concepts. Because if you get hung up in the physics or the dynamics of how it works, it's going to be a struggle to get past it. Yeah. Okay. I think I know enough to be dangerous about how it works, but I'm much more interested in somebody else proved that it can work. So now I'm going to go figure out what the globally scalable business cases are to start applying it to, which is where the opportunity lies, in my opinion. And that's where I think people should focus, not on how does it work. With that said, it's applicable. It's a digitally distributed permanent ledger of data blocks that build chronologically and are shared by the stakeholders to that data. Okay, that's the blockchain.
A little bit more complicated than I flip my light switch on and I get light.
Okay. It's only as good as the data that goes into it. Okay. By the way, so is AI. AI is only as good as the data that goes into it. And we didn't really cover that, but maybe that's a different show or a different guest. But at any rate, and I'm okay with that. Blockchain as a permanent digital record distributed across millions of computers, at least theoretically, is unhackable.
So the encryption part of it is the big difference, right?
But it's also a permanent record.
Okay.
And it's portable.
Can't be destroyed. Is that what that means? Okay.
Okay. So what would you want to keep a permanent record of? Your health? Your medical history? Have you ever gone to the doctor's office and had to fill out the clipboard? 3 pages in writing.
Last week.
Okay.
How are we still at that point?
But I did it at the other doctor. Yeah, well, I don't have access to that information. You have to do it again here. Well, why can't I enter it on my phone? Well, because we use paper, right? Like, could you imagine if you had a blockchain supported medical record and you decided who got access to it when you wanted for as long as you wanted and not a minute longer. And you never had to fill out that clipboard again. And I do think a lot of people go, oh, that sounds really good. Because we've all shared that crappy experience together. But more to the business point, smart contracts, if this, then that, okay? Real-time settlement. Not if you've refied a home or done a home loan, right? 60 days and maybe 75 days because it's hard to get things done in 60 days anymore, right? Imagine being able to do that in real time. Okay. Fractional ownership. I want to own a piece of the Willis Tower. I love that building, but I could never buy it. But I could buy a token or a share in it. And I'm going to grow tired of it in a year and then I'm going to sell it. And maybe I made money and maybe I didn't. Okay. So there's tokenization. You could do voting. Think of all the voting issues that maybe we did or didn't have in the United States in this last presidential election. I take no sides on it. All I say is if you had done it with blockchain ballots, there'd be nothing to talk about. Okay? Paying taxes, property records, educational records. I could go on and on and on.
It's making a lot of sense. I mean, now it makes sense as to why it's called a wallet. That, you know, like,
it's your data and it's for you to learn how to control and monetize. Right now we take our currency, which is physical in nature, and we give it to a central authority of trust, which is a bank or somebody akin to a bank to take care of for us and then charge us a little bit to access it once in a while when we need access to it, which is better than keeping it under the mattress, which turned out not to be the best idea, right? Banks served a really great purpose. But I challenged the entire banking industry over the next 20 years to reinvent themselves because I don't need them as a central authority of trust anymore. My currency is now digital. It's not paper. It's not coin. Okay. It's digital and it's mine. And I want to share it with the people I want to share it with in real time for only as long as I want them to have access to it. And then I want to revoke the access to it. In other words, I want to start to license my data and my currency at my beck and call and at my control, not have somebody charge me to keep it safe. And it turns out it wasn't all that safe to begin with, right?
And to some extent, it breaks down geographic barriers. You can exchange with other countries. You're not. I mean, the e-commerce is booming right now. It takes away some of the foreign exchange. I mean, powerful stuff.
Right. And so Bitcoin was actually invented first. But then they needed the underlying infrastructure to make it globally fungible. And then they invented blockchain. It wasn't the other way around.
Really?
Most people think blockchain was invented and then Bitcoin came along as the first killer app. It was 100% the opposite of that.
Wow. I didn't know that either.
So now, could it be bigger than the internet? Well,
I think so.
It's going to reinvent pretty much every business system and every business process that we can think of. And probably in the next 10 years. So is that bigger than the internet? Or it's just the internet 2.0, or it's the next iteration, right?
Well, we spent a few minutes on something that is equivalent to fire. We spent a few minutes on something that is bigger than the internet. Let's end, and we could go all day long with this conversation, but let's end with the new oil, data.
Yeah.
Talk to me about data. I mean, because a lot of these things, a lot of these things involve massive amounts of data to a scale that we've not seen ever before. How do we harness it? How do we make intelligent decisions from it? Do we need AI for that? Do we tell me
you'll
what
have AI for it, right?
Because right now there's a lot of data being generated right now, right? And I think what I heard you say before is we're just giving it away for free.
Well, we're giving it away for free, mostly unknowingly.
Yeah.
Right, which is unnerving when you have that reality check, and you accept it as probably right. Mm-hmm. Okay. I also think that we spin off, each of us, every single day, like 10 gigabytes of data.
Okay.
Every person on Earth on average, which means you and me are doing 100 because there's a whole bunch of people in a remote corner of the Earth that aren't spinning off any data. Okay.
10 gigabytes a day?
A day. Okay. So what are we doing? We're paying people to store it for us. Okay. But what are we doing with that? We're going to get to a point where we're going to pay people to get rid of it for us because we're going to accumulate so much of it. And that is a fundamental shift of mindset that catches people off guard, right? There will be a day when all you can do is pay people to get rid of it. Think about that for a second. Yeah. Okay. That's how much data there is. So now if you can harness it and apply rules, AI, mechanisms to mine the data for anomalies and opportunities that we as humans would have missed or wouldn't have had the time to do, and then somebody brings us a let's just call it a blockchain marketplace, which is a place we can bring our data to meet up with consumers of data, and we can make a match, okay? And we can monetize it by licensing it for a minute, an hour, a day, a week, a year, forever. We write the rules. We set our own price. If there's somebody who wants your data and you don't want them to have it, you just say, no, sorry, it's not for you. Competitor, who knows? With the ability to revoke the access to it and never give up ownership of it, you can make millions or billions of dollars personally. But imagine an entity doing that, or a city doing that, or a country doing that. So data, in most people's opinion, over the next 10 years, again, that 10-year inflection point's pretty spot on, but maybe it's 20, because all those different curves of change, right, are a little bit different for all the different reasons, for all the different stakeholders. But most people believe that your data is actually worth more than your money. Somebody said, I'll give you your McDonald's order for free if you'll just take a minute and fill out a form. Give me your data. Yeah. Because I'll be able to use that data to add with the other data that I've collected and monetize that in the ways that I'm talking about. Yeah. And in exchange for that, I'm willing to give you a free meal. And not free. You had to give something up to get it. But you didn't reach into your pocket. You didn't use a credit card. You didn't pay in a traditional sense of paying. You paid with data. That seems to be where we're headed with it.
And I didn't intentionally combine the blockchain to the data bridge, but the fact that, it sounds like that's another massive application, for the privacy issues, for the security issues that we talked about in the last episode. So it's such cool stuff. Again, I could just keep going on and on about it with it, but it's fascinating that it's coming quickly. It seems like there's a lot of opportunity ahead of us, a lot of change ahead of us, but a lot of opportunity.
Change can be scary. Let's be honest about it, right? Change is good. You go first. We'll see how it goes, right? Yeah. There's a lot of that, but it can be abundant and it can be filled with opportunity. And I do believe that there's never been a greater opportunity to create wealth or to shift the balance of who has it and who gets it next as a result of all the things that we're talking about. But we've got to have our guard up in a way that we didn't used to have our guard up, because as good as it's going to make things great, it's going to take some of the cybersecurity and data privacy and other issues and make it bad. And we have to be ready for both. But I prefer to take the abundant, optimistic.
You'll take those odds. Yeah. Jeff, you've given us so many things to think about and so many great ideas. I guess my final question would be if and you're not, if you were retiring tomorrow, well, you got a lot ahead of you. You got a lot of change making to do, but to the young professionals coming up, that are starting up their careers, that maybe the students in school, the young leaders, what would you say to them? What advice would you give to say, here, after everything I've experienced and learned and seen, this is what I would suggest you do?
Well, that's another good question. And I have a 25-year-old son and a 22-year-old daughter.
Okay.
And so this is, a reality check for me. This is what we're talking about in my family. And for that reason, I think things that could be used as advice opportunities, perhaps for others. And that is, number one, be passionate. Don't get into a rut of, I have to work to get a check, to pay my bills, because it's a tough rut to get out of once you're in it, right? Life's too short. Find something that you're absolutely passionate about, that you cannot wait to get up in the morning to do, that you're willing to stay up late at night to do more of, willing to work all weekend long if you had to, right? And do it with like-minded people who share that passion, because together you can accomplish more than you can accomplish, individually. Sure. But to me, that's one thing. The other is to be exponential. The world is loaded with good ideas that aren't necessarily actionable. So then you start to think about, well, what are the actionable ideas? And there's a whole lot of those too. Not as many, but a lot. You know what we need on that street? We need a liquor store. And so I'm going to open one. That's an actionable item. That's an actionable idea. But where's the scale in that? So if you go from crazy idea to actionable idea to scalable, globally scalable, exponential idea, the list isn't quite as long. And you need more resources and more support in doing it. But I would tell people, don't act on every good idea that comes along. Be very strategic and purposeful in picking exponential ideas so that the same amount of effort and manpower, person power that goes into it provides an exponential reward, not a linear or traditional reward for the effort. Same effort, 1,000 times return. Why are you wasting your time on something that's going to provide an ordinary return?
Great advice, especially while we're still dealing with analog time.
I didn't learn
right?
it too late in my life, honestly. I didn't learn it until I started hanging out with Ray Kurzweil and Peter Diamandis, and they're like, why are you doing that? Where's the return in that? You could take that same effort and get 1,000 times return. Why wouldn't you do that instead? It's like, oh, duh. It makes sense to me. Yeah. If I learned it when I was 25, though, imagine where I might be right now.
Sure.
So that's my advice to somebody young. Be passionate and find something exponential.
I think you're in a pretty great spot, and I can't thank you enough for being on our show. A 2-part episode, especially.
So excited. I'm so honored that you think it's worthy of that. That's awesome.
Jeff, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this conversation, please take a moment to rate our show. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the Work Inspired podcast so that you don't miss any of the incredible guests we have planned for upcoming episodes. We'll continue to find the best and brightest minds in business so that you can learn, grow, and succeed, and so that we can all work inspired. Work Inspired is brought to you by BOS, a leader in commercial working environments and a Hayworth best-in-class dealership. Experience our 360 approach and discover the team, tools, and techniques required to navigate the complexity of your next workspace at BOS.com. If you have ideas, feedback, or would like to be featured on our show, please email podcast@BOS.com. Thank you for listening. This has been a Workspace digital production. If you're interested in launching a podcast at your organization, please email info@workspace.digital for a free consultation.